Thanks for joining us at Intellectual Chocolate, where we have intelligent conversations with brilliant Black minds. I'm Rashida, and I'm glad to be with you. And today I have with me Christoph Jenkins. He is a poet and the founder of The Poet Life. Christoph, I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it is a pleasure. So you have a business that you started called The Poet Life. Now, what I would like to ask you is, what led you to be a poet? What led you down this road?
Good question. I get that question a lot, and it really has to do with my storyline as far as, starting from first grade.
Okay.
And it's funny that I remember that because I don't remember too much in relation to my earlier stages.
Right, right.
But I do remember in the first grade, my teacher assigned the class a major, like now that I'm thinking about it, it was a major project. And what it was we were asked to create a poetry book.
Okay.
Not just to write the poetry in the poetry book, but we had to actually create the book, like from the binding,
okay,
to whether it's the forward, so we, myself, and I was like one of those that love extra credit. And so I just went like overboard and cardboard, and then put glued felt on the cardboard to make the binding of the book, printed out the pages, wrote the poems myself, and so like I was being exposed, didn't even know it at the point at that time. I was being exposed to something that I would continuously do for the rest of my life, and so that there kind of led me on my path where I've been writing poetry for weddings, family members, funerals, accomplishments and things of that nature. So yeah, that's where I found my creativity.
That's awesome, because sometimes when you think of poetry, you often think of sometimes the published work, that part of it, but a lot of times you think, especially in our community, going to like a poetry where you go and actually give your
open mic.
Sorry, I'm at a loss for words, but
an open mic.
An open mic, yes. You go to an open mic and actually give and allow your giftings and your talents to be displayed before an audience. And so, like you're saying, you actually wrote poems for funerals and weddings, and I'm like, well, wow, this is speaking to the idea of this being something that you're able to monetize, because you're not just at the poetry club on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night.
Right.
There's other ways that you can utilize your gift to be a career or a business for yourself.
Totally.
And I know that when we spoke, you shared with me about some branding that you did and ways to monetize. So you had an opportunity to work with other poets. So tell us about the formation of your business. How did it come into existence?
Well, let's start here. I started a nonprofit called Fighting Cancer with Poetry. That's where it originated.
Okay.
And the reason why I started that nonprofit is because a friend of mine, Justin Islar, he passed away at the age of 25 in 2012 of osteosarcoma cancer. And he fought for 7 long years. That means he was diagnosed at the tender age of 18, freshman year at Coppin State University.
Okay.
So, imagine freshman year and you get news like that.
Right.
But the thing is, he didn't start writing poetry until after he was diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
And I didn't know that. I didn't find that out until I talked to his mom after he passed, because he wrote so well. I thought he'd been writing all his life.
And so you guys were friends. Did he know that you were a poet?
Yes, he always knew I was a poet. Yeah.
Okay, but he never shared that part with you about that he began writing.
exactly, you know,
Okay.
and but his poetry chronicled his journey with cancer.
Mm.
Yes, he wrote 12 amazing poems from that that detailed his diagnosis all the way to, you know, is pretty much his last day.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that just showed me that if he found poetry and used that as a coping mechanism, a way to find peace in a storm like that, you know, where he's fighting for his life, but
Right.
not just that, not just for himself, but others as well. So
Right.
when they got a chance to read it or hear it, because he then started to recite his poems at events and things of that nature, that then kind of transcended
Okay.
and inspired others. So let me go back to answering your question. The
Okay.
reason why I started Poet Life is because um, I started the nonprofit called Fighting Cancer with Poetry. And, you know, I've been doing it for 4 years from 2012 to, you know, to now. And I was like, okay, running a nonprofit really means like non-profit. And, you know, and and as noble as it is, it's super hard
Right.
to run a nonprofit grassroots, you know, begging people to, you know, come to your, because I would put on what I call what do I call them? Poetry jam fundraisers,
Okay.
right? And so I partnered with Busboys and Poets here in the DMV, where we would put on events, raise funds. The first event, we raised about $4,000 and donated it to the Sarcoma Foundation.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, and so, you know, we were just changing lives just around the country. We performed at the White House when President Barack Obama was in office, on the National Mall. So, you know, people were just reaching out to us and saying, we just love what you're doing, because then the survivors and the fighters were utilizing poetry. They were finding out that they had another outlet that they could
Wow.
use, an alternative outlet, if you will.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, if you don't have cancer, you can't really relate,
That's true. That's
right? And so they felt like they were in a box, and they felt like, all right, the only way I can express myself is through talking to someone. But we wanted to show them, no, there's another way where the pen can relate, the paper can relate to
wow.
you, it'll listen to you, you know, and then you can express yourself and get all of that that you're feeling out. Because
Okay.
if you don't, it's just being bottled in, you know. And so, again, to answer your question, um, so I said, okay, there are no funds coming in. Like, things were, you know, money was coming out of my pockets. I was
Right.
putting up shirts and this, that, and third. So I said, so what can I do to supplement this? I don't want to go too far to the left and just start a random business. How
Right.
can I monetize the lane that I'm in?
Okay.
So I said, let me start a poetry, some form of poetry business.
Okay.
And that's where Poet Life, I woke up and woke my wife up and said, I have an idea. And my initial thought was life poet for whatever reason. Um, and I think my thought pattern was I can reach everyone. And my thought process was everybody can be a life poet, like even a doctor. When he's in surgery, he's performing poetry.
Right.
Life is poetry,
Right.
right?
Poetry in
So
motion.
yeah, you know, so someone playing basketball, the way they play is like poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So they can be a life poet.
Okay.
But then as I'm reading books and watching TED Talks and things of that nature, like, you don't want to try to reach everybody, you
Okay.
know, because then you don't really have a niche, you don't have a lane that you're in. You
Right.
just like
The
fishing
target.
straws.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then I think a couple of weeks later, I was like, oh wow, I'm just like, why didn't I think of this? Poet Life. Like
Mm.
that makes more sense. I think I was watching a Tupac video,
Okay.
And, and you know how across the stomach has Thug Life?
Thug Life. Yes.
I
Yes.
was like, oh, Poet Life.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how it played out. That's how creativity works. You see,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's how it works for me anyway.
Okay, so you know what, if you're just tuning in, I am speaking with Christoph Jenkins, and we're discussing his company, The Poet Life. He is a poet, and I'm with you. I'm Rashida with Intellectual Chocolate, so I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Intellectual Chocolate platform at intellectualchocolate.com, where we have intelligent conversations with brilliant Black minds, and also for financial literacy and to learn how to grow your business. Today, I encourage you to go to theblackbusinessschool.com. So, Christoph, so you said that you started the business
Right.
and we talked about the creativity and how the name for the business came. So what steps did you take to monetize it? Because that was one of your inspirations. So you
Yes.
had the nonprofit, now you want to monetize. So what steps did you take to lead you there?
So, have the nonprofit, and, I go to a lot of open mics and poetry events in general. And one common denominator that kind of um, irked me a little bit was that uh, poets perform without a uniform.
Mm, okay.
Rappers have their uniforms or chains, go to
Right,
whatever, their
right, right,
uniform.
right.
Singers have their outfits, and they have a uniform. But poets, uh, not all poets, I say, take their appearance into their stage presence.
Got you.
You'll see poets coming straight from work with Alito's pizza shirt on and just get
Right,
up there and perform their art.
right,
And I understand it, because your art is your art, but let's enhance your art with your appearance.
right.
Let's put on, so I thought to myself, okay, let me start a clothing line. And so it's Poet Life Gear. And I started off with one hat that said Poet Life across the front. And people were purchasing the hat, they were performing in the hat. I
Okay,
mean, just imagine you got a poet on stage performing with a hat that said Poet Life. I'm like, oh, he's really taking his craft serious.
okay, yeah.
He's living it. It's
Right,
the poet life,
right,
you know,
right.
right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, so it went from a clothing line to poets saying, do you manage poets? And so we went from just a clothing line to managing some poets, getting them some gigs. They know me as the guy that, like, knows a lot of poets. And so
Okay,
companies, organizations, churches call me, hey, do you have a poet that can speak on this topic?
okay.
Yes. So they can actually reach out to me, thepoetlife.com, and say, okay, fill out this form, and it says, what's the subject? What's the theme of your event? What's the topic that you would like the poet to speak on?
Okay.
And I'll read. Now, when I hire poets, if you will, I'll ask them what their portfolio looks like. They have to send
Okay.
me their YouTube links of all of their performance videos.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that means I have an archive of their topics and their poems that they have. And
Okay.
that, so when I get that request, I can say, oh, he has a poem based on this topic or this theme that this church has an anniversary on, or
Got
whatever the
you.
case may be. And then
Okay.
I send them out, they perform, they get paid, right? So yeah, it's pretty cool. And it's just me thinking of a way to say, okay, for 30 years, I've been told there's no money in poetry.
Hmm.
I'm 35,
Okay.
right? So for 5 years, I've been figuring out, Googling, even in Google, like, how can I make money, in poetry? Couldn't find anything,
Okay. So
you
you really
know,
had to get creative and innovative.
had to get creative and innovative.
Wow. I
Yeah,
just love how it took on a life of its own. Like you decided
right.
I'm gonna start with a hat. And
Yeah.
back to what you were saying about a uniform, because you're looking mighty spiffy today, you got your suit and
Thank you.
tie. So when
Thank
you're
you.
speaking of uniform, you're not necessarily saying, I want you to come suited in a tie, but in some
No.
some manner that you're
Yeah.
representing what your work is.
Yeah.
And it's easy to attach a phrase to it
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
people will automatically, it's a conversation starter.
Totally.
Right. So
Totally.
you're kind of walking and branding
Yeah.
yourself, and you can just
Yeah.
kind of expand and grow from there.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, now poets who, if you start thinking about the concept of a starving artist,
Right.
now
Right.
you don't necessarily have to
You don't have to be.
and
Yeah.
and what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to commit to a life of poverty in order
Right.
to fulfill your passion for what you want to do in the arts.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's great.
Definitely.
So I know that you have the piece where you work with other poets and you help get them gigs. So you also have I believe it's called the Poet Academy, the Poet Life Academy.
The Poet Life Academy. Everything that
Okay.
pretty much everything that we do is the Poet Life something. And so,
Okay.
with the booking, it's Poet Life agency.
Okay.
And as you're speaking about the Poet Life Academy,
Okay.
where we go into schools and teach the youth from ages 5 to 17 how to write, poetry. Um, Notice I said first how to write because we're dealing with age five, 6, and
Right.
7. So
Okay.
they're still learning how to write.
Right.
Yeah, and spell and all of that. So it's the education piece, not just all right, let's do rhymes, but we're actually teaching them how to read, but also share. So it's the writing and the spoken word piece as well. So they're
Right.
learning how to have stage presence, um,
Mm-hmm.
public speaking,
Yes.
and you learning that at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you'll be ready
You'll be ready.
for whatever,
I
for
have to say,
podcasting, for recitations at church,
right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
I saw
so,
some of the images of the kids on your website of them
yeah,
at the mic, and I was just so impressed. I'm like, look at these kids are really young,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you're allowing them to be exposed to that at an early age and to get that
yeah,
experience. And probably the same as what you realized years later, the project
right,
that your first grade teacher gave you, you didn't realize how monumental
exactly,
that was.
exactly. They have no idea what this is going to do for them.
Right.
It's building their confidence, boosting their self-esteem, and boasting self-expression.
Okay, okay. So we talked about you said from ages 5 to 17.
Yes,
Okay, so what
yes,
do you target with some of the other groups? Because you have them in groups by ages.
yes, yes.
So the
So the
next group.
reason, yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead.
No, so you said that the 5-year-old, you were actually teaching them to write and learning to incorporate. So the next phase, what's happening with the next age group?
So it's funny you asked that. So from let's say elementary to middle, we call that Poet Life Kids.
Okay,
So it's 3 levels within the Poet Life Academy. So it's Poet Life Kids all the way to 12. From 13 to 17, that's Poet Life High, kind of like Cooley High.
right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then from 17 on high on and older, it's Poet Life University.
Okay,
So there was my creativity.
gotcha.
It's like Poet Life is like my sandbox. It allows me to create and be creative. But to answer your question, we then just have conversations to start off. We start off with just, hey, how's your day? Like what's going on? Because the older kids, they already have their opinions on life. They're in relationships, girlfriend, boyfriends,
Right.
right? And so to just spark the conversation and to build the trust, because at that age they're like, all right, so who's this guy? Who's this woman coming in here to teach us whatever? Like, I don't want to do poetry,
Right.
because they don't know where we're going with it.
Got you.
They just know the corny read, the corny poems and stuff like that. And
Got
so they're not understanding that we're helping them learn how to express themselves. So we just have a forum-like conversation at first,
Okay.
and then we kind of go into the activities of how to rhyme, and then, you know, we'll pull out some songs that they like, whether it's Drake or, you know, kind of
Tupac.
relate to them. Yep, yep. Gain that trust, and we kind of go from there. And they, by second, third class, they're like, I can't wait for Poet Life class. It's just,
Wow.
yeah.
That is great. If you're just tuning in, I am having the pleasure of speaking with Christoph Jenkins and about running his company, The Poet Life. I'm Rashida, and I'm with you from Intellectual Chocolate, where we have intelligent conversations with brilliant Black minds. And I want you to actually go to Intellectual Chocolate and subscribe at intellectualchocolate.com. And for financial literacy and to learn how to grow your business today,
Mhm.
please visit theblackbusinessschool.com. So you were talking about, we're talking about, you know, the kids of different age groups, but I know something that I really want you to speak on is the concept of the kids using it as a means of expressing themselves, because I know we talked about your friend early on and your nonprofit that led into you doing a for-profit business, and your friend was diagnosed with cancer and he eventually succumbed. And
Right,
but during that period, he started writing poetry to document his journey
right.
with his diagnosis. And so for kids, I know you have also been inspired to encourage them or to help to facilitate the young people being able to express themselves via poetry. So can you speak to that?
Sure. So when we say, for instance, the elementary or middle school students, some of them have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and the thing is, a lot of times we won't even know that,
Oh, wow.
and we won't even know that. It was an instance where after class, one of the administrators was, you know, they came to me and said, I just can't believe that Billy and Johnny are so attentive in your class. I'm like, why? Why? Because, you know, they have a situation. They told me what it was. I was like,
Right.
oh, we had no clue. You know, we just thought they were being creative and being excited to, you know, to be in our class. And so that just speaks to, I just believe in those instances, a lot of times classes aren't interactive enough.
Right.
You know, when it's really formal and you got the test and you got the pen and or the computer with the laptop, and the kid is like, what is this? Like, you know, I want to use my creative side.
Right.
So they just flowed, you know, into what we were doing like it was nothing. You know,
Right.
they were like, I want to be a rapper when I grow up.
Right.
And not to be cliche or anything, you know, we're talking about white kids.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, and had already had some lyrics written down
Okay.
already before we even started class. You know, I already
Okay.
had a notepad, so they were already doing it and didn't necessarily know that they were writing poetry.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, you know, it just really speaks to the dilemma that we have in the school system. You know, they've taken out arts of the school
Right.
system. And so what we're doing is putting it back in.
Okay. Okay. And I know you mentioned like the kids expressing themselves and like saying they wanted to use their creative side and to express themselves, but they didn't even realize that's what they
Right.
needed.
Right.
So so you're giving them an outlet to express themselves. And we talked about uh, kids, you know, suffering trauma and just having,
Right.
especially in our community, coming from various backgrounds,
Hmm.
and especially when we think about our young Black boys who are
Right.
not encouraged, you know, always to express themselves and express their feelings and their emotions. So is
Sure.
that something that you encourage the kids to do?
Yeah, totally. One of our kids in our class said their aunt had passed, and their family asked her to write the obituary poem
Oh,
and to recite it and to recite it at the funeral, kind of like me,
right, right, right.
right? Right. So she didn't know what to write, and so in the class we were able to help her, with the poem that she was going to write, and all we did was have her talk, have her talk to us,
Okay.
and so we just basically said, and with the activities that we taught her, all right, so let's use the material that you were talking about in relation to your aunt, how you feel about it, and let's just start writing. And we can worry about whether it rhymes or not, later. Let's just get your feelings out, express yourself, and then we'll work on the technique, post-op, if you will, right? And she came back a week later and was like on cloud nine, super excited that her poem went well at her aunt's funeral. And she's seven,
Okay.
seven, and had no problem, no fear
Wow.
to
That's
recite
impressive.
it. That's
That's
major,
impressive. 7 years
you
old.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So to control and to manage all of those feelings and to use her creativity to as a tool and a resource, that's what it's doing for them already, and they don't even really realize it yet.
Okay. Okay. So you're able to see some transformations in the lives of the young kids,
Yes,
building some skills, as
yes,
well as in the older kids where
right,
they're a
right,
little, they got into that teenage phase. Like you said, they're
yeah,
not as trusting. This isn't
right,
cool. Why am
right,
I here? Sort of
right,
thing. Okay.
right.
That is
Yeah.
great. So, do you specifically target the African American community, or are you open to serving all
We're,
communities?
we're, we're totally open. Our classes are super diverse because the schools that we reach out to or reach out to us are already diverse
Okay.
within nationalities, whether it's Black, Hispanic, White, Asian. It's like a pot of gumbo,
Okay.
and there's you don't see any division within the class. Kids don't see that. Like they see it, but they don't use it to divide them like adults do.
Right.
They're having fun. They're talking, like brothers and sisters, fighting and all of that like brothers and sisters, but it's not based on you're white, I'm black. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Not at those
Um,
early ages.
yeah, no,
Mhm.
and again, even if it was, they're still learning how to express themselves uh, creatively as opposed to letting things build up and let bad behavior control them.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So we also have a program where we're working with schools to because they're starting to not suspend kids and send them home. They're
Okay.
starting to suspend in school.
Okay.
But the problem with that is they're still like not doing anything. They're like, all right,
Okay.
just
Sitting in an
sit there and do your
office or
homework.
something.
Sit there and do your homework, which
Right.
more than likely than not, they're gonna be on their cell phone, right? And so we're coming in and saying, let's rehabilitate them, if you will,
Mm.
right? Let's use the gift of poetry, the gift of writing to help them self-express and try to figure out why they're exhibiting the behavior they're exhibiting.
Right. Right.
So when they do get back in class, they're not just going back to their normal ways.
So it can be therapeutic as well, the process.
Exactly, exactly. It's all across the board, And but when you just think of poetry as a poem, violets are red, rose. I mean, so it's like you have to look at it deeper than that, and that's why I could never find a way to monetize it because I wasn't finding people that thought in that way as poetry is an industry right now.
Right.
Poetry is a community,
Yes. Yes. And honestly,
and
that's the
that's
way.
cool. That's good.
Right. It's
That's
not a
good.
bad thing. Right.
It's not. No,
Right.
it's not. But it's also and it can be an industry,
Yes. Yes.
right?
It's interesting because prior to our conversation, um, what I thought was like the open mics, you know,
Right,
or I've known a few people to be published in books, but not their
right,
own works with a collective of other poets. Like you submit a poem, and if it gets chosen, it gets published.
right.
But there's not really any
Yeah,
income attached
yeah,
necessarily.
yeah,
It's so small because
yeah.
you're sharing it with like maybe 100 different poets.
Right. They'll do their the chat books is what they call them.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, small collections of their poems, and then so when they do go to open mics or churches or you know small events, they'll have merch. That'll be their merchandise. You know, so I have books, only $10, only $10. That's the lingo at the open mic.
Right, right.
But
Got you.
so that's a way that they have merchandise, and
Okay.
that's great, and that's great. But let's take it to another level.
Right,
You know,
right.
so why aren't there a lot of podcasts? You know,
Mm.
so I said, so if I'm asking that question, then let's start a podcast. So we have the Poet Life podcast.
Okay.
So when I ask these questions, I then answer them for myself. I said, let's do it.
Gotcha.
We
Gotcha.
can be the example.
So creating streams of income for poets.
Yes.
I love it. And if you're
Yes.
just tuning in, I am speaking with Christoph Jenkins. He is a poet and he is the founder of The Poet Life. And we're discussing his organization. And I'm Rashida. I'm with you from Intellectual Chocolate. And I want you to make sure to subscribe to intellectualchocolate.com, where we have intelligent conversations with brilliant Black minds. And also for financial literacy and to learn how to grow your business today, please visit theblackbusinessschool.com. So I think this is great. I know we talked about you are in collaboration with Busboy.
Yes. Bus
So for
boys and
those of
poets.
us
Yeah.
busboy poets,
Bus boys and poets.
bus boys
Yes.
and poets, I stand
Yes.
corrected. I want you to share with us how that organization came to be.
So let's see. Basically, the I guess the story is Langston Hughes. Let's start there. Langston Hughes, when he was younger, he was a busboy.
Okay.
He was busting suds. He was washing dishes. He was going to the tables and getting the dirty dishes and taking them back to the dishwasher, so on and so forth. But he was also an aspiring poet.
Right.
Don't ask me dates and things of that nature.
I know that's
Uh,
right. I
but he
think
was
I know
young.
he was
You
born in
know?
1901.
Well, okay, there
So
you
we
go.
so
So
we at least know that, right?
yeah, okay. So he was an aspiring poet. So let's just say he was in his 20s, okay,
Okay.
his early 20s, and I can't remember the famous poet that was at the restaurant that he was, you know, a busboy at, but he saw that famous poet that he admired so much, and when he was, you know, getting the dirty dishes and things of that nature, he slipped some poetry that he'd been writing under his newspaper or napkin or something of the sort.
Right.
And he made sure he put his contact information and there's name and everything.
Gotcha.
And then Langston Hughes then realized maybe a week or two, maybe a month later, that his poetry was in the newspaper, and this famous poet gave him credit and said this amazing busboy named Langston Hughes is an amazing poet. Check him out. That's kind of how he became who he is, if you will.
Wow.
Yeah.
Make known.
So
Was able to do his
and
work. Mm-hmm.
and so the owner and founder of Busboys and Poets, that's Busboys and the word and poets.com, started his company, and it's a it's like a laptop lounge, restaurant, bar, library, and in the back there's an auditorium for open mics. So
Okay.
that's where all the poets in the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia go to perform. I mean, you name the famous poet, they've performed at Busboys and Poets.
Okay.
And it's a chain. They have about 7 or 8 locations here, but also there's one in Oakland as well.
Okay.
So I would encourage you to check it out. It's pretty awesome.
And you collaborate with them, right? The Poet Life
Yes,
collaborates
yes,
with Bus Boys and Poets.
yes, and yes. So starting September 1st, groundbreaking partnership project to where on Saturdays we're turning their restaurant into a school from 9 a.m. to 11. We're inviting or encouraging parents to enroll their students or their kids and become students at the Poet Life Academy, where we'll be doing what we've been doing in schools.
Right.
So it's just an awesome opportunity, and we truly appreciate the partnership. It's just another level. We're just thinking about, okay, we're in schools, so we have contracts with schools, but how can we then work within the community as well? Because we get parents, that say, so how can we get involved? How can I get my child in your Poet Life Academy? But if we only have private contracts, how can they do that? And so now, on the weekends, they can, enroll into our weekend classes at Bus Boys and Poets.
Okay. So how, and I know that your organization is mobile. So how, if
Yes.
someone's not in the DMV area, how can they link up with you to partner with you if they wanted to bring something
Yes.
like that to their city?
Sure, totally. So poets are everywhere, right? So,
Right.
say for instance, as a matter of fact, we're working with some schools in Miami, and we're here. So we mobilize, hire poets in Miami, right? So now we're putting more poets to work where they're not just doing open mics and chat books, and so that's just expanding the brand, but also teaching and being the example to poets to say, I can really do something other than what I've been doing for the past 10 years, and really make a living out of it. One of
Mhm.
our students, she's 12, and she's like, when I grow up, I want to be a poet. But if there's no industry, there's no lane,
Right.
then how can I say that yes, you can do whatever you want to do, but if there's no
Right.
lane for it, then I'm sitting there lying,
Right.
right?
Right.
So my goal is to do what Russell Simmons did for rap.
Okay.
Back in the day, rap was a fad. It was a trend. It wasn't an industry.
Hmm.
There wasn't million millionaires back then. It was
Right.
a what they said, it was a fad. But they made it an industry to where that you can make a living out of it. And
Okay.
so that's my goal with poetry and spoken word.
Oh, wow. That is great. And so if someone would like to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
They can call 1-833 Poet Life, or they can go to thepoetlife.com and just Google Poet Life. We'll come up. We're on every platform pretty much: Instagram, Twitter. Throw a stone. We'll respond.
And so I have this one last question before we get out of here. I know that you are a father of beautiful young daughters
Mm,
and you're passionate
yes,
about teaching them entrepreneurship. Why is that
totally.
important to you?
Oh man. So for the creative, the entrepreneurial spirited person, we feel like we're in a box, when we have to go get jobs and be like this in interviews. And it's good to learn all of that, but when all of your friends and family are saying that's the only way,
Yeah.
to succeed in life, and to be an
Right.
engineer and be behind a laptop or a computer. Um, and I have a 9 to 5. I'm not against I'm not against 9 to 5ers,
Right.
definitely. But I look at it as, I can't remember who said it, but your 9 to 5 is where you're employed. Your 5 to midnight is where you're deployed.
Mm.
You're deployed to work on your work,
Right.
your life's work, your legacy,
Gotcha.
right? The impact on the world. You know, let
Mm-hmm.
your 9 to 5 finance your dreams, your purpose, your passion. And so that's how I look at it, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, so but to answer your question, I mean, from birth, you know, it, they're learning to save. They're learning to after they're finished playing with their toys and they're done with them, you're not throwing them away. You're learning how to make them products and sell them.
Mm. Okay.
And yeah, you know, and I'm all about charity, giving them to
Right.
goodwill. But let's use what we have to learn how to sell, how to, you know, speak and pitch a product or project, you know. And so my daughters, I have a 4-month old, a 2-month, 2-year old, and a 3-year old. So
Okay.
I'm tired. So, 3 daughters under 4. So just imagine, yeah.
I get it. I get it. But I think that that speaks.
Love them to life, but I'm super tired right now.
Gotcha. But I think that that speaks to your earlier point when you were speaking about that you when you realize the nonprofit lane, there's no
Yeah,
profit in that, and I think
yeah,
the same with us always thinking of just giving everything away. You know, as a community, we do that. We
right.
give away
Yes,
everything, and other communities figure out how to
yeah,
monetize the things that we
right,
use and sell them back to us.
right, right.
I think that you are
Yeah,
on point with teaching your girls young, like these are your dolls now.
totally.
This could be, you
Yes,
know, this doll that you may have paid $25 for. Now we're gonna sell it to $2 or $3 for $2 or $3 back to somebody.
there
And
we
it's
go.
the
Yeah,
concept. It's the concept. I get it.
yes,
I love it.
yep.
Well, Christoph, I thank you so much for joining me today. It has been
Thank
an
you.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for tuning in as well and watching the video. And also, I want you to like and share this video because this kind of information needs to be shared amongst our community so that we can see that there are different avenues in terms of how to make an income and to have other revenue streams with our creative side. So I think that is so important. And also, if you have something brilliant to say, or if you know someone that has something brilliant to say, I invite you to go to intellectualchocolate.com and to sign up. Sign up and submit the form to be a guest on this platform. And again, I'm Rashida, and you can follow me on all social media platforms at Let's Talk About It with Rashida. It has been great, and I have enjoyed being here with you today. And again, Christoph, you be well.
Thank you.